Welcome back to the channel, guys. I am the Landlocked Shipwright, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. In our house, we have big cats. And because we have big cats, the standard cat tree doesn't exactly hold up. So what we're going to do is we are going to rebuild this cat tree from the ground up. We're going to completely replace it. So all three of these pillars down here, including this one up here, are going to be turned out of wood, and then they're going to get wrapped. We're going to replace these with something a little bit more substantial and trim them up nice and pretty because you know we like things bougie. And then we're going to extend this platform to become a bench because this sits in front of a window and we want to have a place for people to sit and our big cat's a place to lay. So we're going to get into it and I'll take you along for the next part. All right, so the first step we're going to do is we're going to turn those three posts. We've got one of them chucked up in the lathe here already, and to get it nice and seated, I have this beautiful 4-dog chuck that I got from, oddly enough, wish.com a long time ago, but seems to have held up pretty well. I've actually turned brass in this lathe before. And then for the tailstock, we just have a live center floating in there, and then used a step bit to actually create a divot in the end so we've got a good lock in. So I pre-cut these 4x4s and knocked the corners off to 32 inches. We only need 28, but that gives me plenty of room to play in the middle and then cut off a true on the end. So our lathe here is an old Delta made in Milwaukee way back in the 1960s, and it even still has the red label on the side that says made in the United States of America. It's been pretty true, and I actually got it for free. A guy that I did some business with a while back brought this to me. He found it on the side of a road. Somebody was throwing it out in the trash from probably Grandpa's garage, and they didn't do much turning, so they were wanting to get rid of it, or they wanted the latest and greatest. But when I got it, it didn't have all the parts and pieces. It was really just minus a motor and needed a little bit of love, needed some oil and things to be dressed up, and was missing the tailstock and missing the head chuck, so had to find something that fit on those. But since then, it's been a pretty great lathe. I've certainly beat the crud out of it along the way. So what we're going to do is I'm going to set you up on a different camera angle, and then we're going to work on getting this thing turned down to size. Getting these rounded in was a bit of a chore. There was a lot of material to remove, and I had to lay out 5 different measurements to establish a nice even taper. But once I got that done, it seemed to work out just fine. So after that, it was just decorating the end pieces and getting them nice. Okay, so that makes 2. So I just got one more to turn up, and we'll be able to move on to the next step of getting the platforms and then getting those upper turnings done to support that other platform. So we'll get this out of the lathe, and we'll get that next one turned, and we'll work on that next step. Whew. All right. So Now that we've just got done cutting some splints, some nice 1/2 by 3/4 stock on the table saw out of ash. So what we're working on in the drawing is we're going to start making these platforms that's in between here. So this is a bench, and that'll get made out of more of that ash. But what we're going to do is take a chunk of plywood and make the center of it, because that's all going to get covered in carpet and you're not really going to see it anyway. And then we are going to wrap the outside edge with this beautiful ash that I got from a friend of mine. So I'm going to get into that, start working in the size of the platforms. So probably what we're going to do is make these square ones first, because they're the easy one. And then that middle one with the radius. What we're actually going to try and do is see if we can't steam bend a piece of ash around that curvature there. But need to cut out the middle of those first. So I'm going to set you up so you can see that next. All right, so we got our pieces cut and got our platforms made. So now we need to start working on wrapping the edge, kind of like we were doing a picture frame. So, and then some of you following at home probably have guesses of how this is going to all go together and how I'm going to attach those pieces. And if your guess was nail gun and glue, you would be correct. Well, winner, winner, chicken dinner. What we're going to do is I'm going to sit you next on the where you're at. Trying to think of what I'm doing here. And yeah, we're just gonna miter all these together, and I'll probably set you up and you can just watch that happen next. So working through cutting these pieces to wrap around the edge, even knowing the parts were nice and square off the table saw, trim work is, still a little finicky. So each of the pieces, even knowing the square, all of them were identical, I still had to go through and get them fitted to it just so everything was laid in really nice. All right, hi. Yeah, so it's that time. We're going to attempt to steam bend this part of the frame to go around that lower platform. And yes, I did steal my wife's Insta-Kettle to do this because boiling a trough of water is way too long and I am way too impatient. But yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about this.
because steam bending is something I've actually done a fair amount of, but it's always feels like a new process every single time I do it. But there's a lot of videos out there and a lot of content. They can probably explain this a lot better than I can, but I'm going to just try. So wood has a material in it that helps hold everything together. It's called lignin. So it kind of acts like a plastic. And if you've ever, been that child where you take a lighter to a chunk of plastic, you understand that it melts, it gets soft. So that's what we're doing here. I have wrapped up our board in towels to help kind of hold the temperature in, hold the heat of the boiling water in. And we are steaming it up and getting it nice and hot to try and loosen up that lignin. And then we're going to try and bend it around a form in the form of the shelf that you saw me cut a second ago. Rule of thumb is for every 1 inch of wood you have, regardless how wide it is, but every 1 inch of thickness that you have to go through, you have about an hour of soak time at heat. So being this is pretty close to 5/8 of an inch, so about a half inch, we're going to go for 30-40 minutes soaked in heat. So the reason I have the trough underneath this is, because one, we're going to continually soak this over that time, and I want to keep it nice and hot. I'm just going to continually pour boiling water over this, and then at the end of it, we're going to pull it out to time and, have a controlled heart attack while we're pulling this out and bending it around a form and praying we got the grain structure right, that it doesn't actually just snap, and then we cry and have a moment, and then do it again because we kind of hate ourselves a little bit. And we only have 2 tries at this before I'm going to get frustrated, and we're going to take the only other piece of material we have, and we're going to curve cut it to go around that curve because I don't want to make more material. So let's see what happens. Don't break, 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 don't fucking break, don't break, don't break, don't break, don't break, don't break, don't break. You love me, you know you do. Don't break. Stop it. Don't break. Don't break. That's not what I told you to do. Okay, life, just like our t-ball coaches when we were kids, gives us second chances. So, yeah, that didn't go exactly how I wanted it to. So, we're going to take that second chance and maintain calm as we waterboard our other piece into doing what we wanted to do. And, yes, I know there's water on the floor. I don't care. The garage door's up there. But, yeah, this one, I'm feeling this one. Yeah, this one's going to make it happen for us. That's how this is going to work. Isn't it? All right, time for a bit of honesty. That was a little bit of fun. But I very much knew this was going to break, and I was just having a little bit of fun on camera. So I want to demonstrate kind of a process of this, of steam bending, where I was actually bending that the wrong direction. So the grain on this runs this way, and you can kind of see it there in the camera, how it runs like this, and I was bending perpendicular to that. Very rarely does that ever work. You're splitting in the wrong direction. There's not enough cross grain to actually hold it all together. You actually want to bend in the same direction as laminate, so bending it this way. So the other reason why I knew this wasn't going to really bend is that this wood I got because it had been killed by the emerald ash borer, which had swept through our area a few years back, and these trees have been standing dead for 3 years. So even though it's still usable wood, it's still got some density to it. It's just not as high quality as it can be. It really wasn't going to be. And on top of that, it's ash wood. It doesn't really like to steam bend unless you have like a proper steamer, and it's usually kind of on the green side. In which case you can the lignin is still active and hasn't cured for X amount of time. So this is technically a form of dried lumber already. So few of you noted that it's like the wood's really dry, and it's like, yeah, you're right, it was. It's good eyes. But yeah, I knew it wasn't going to do that. So anyway, we're going to move on and curve cut that last piece and get on with the project.
So this is my 9-foot mini skiff that I built 2 years ago, and as you can see, these are 1/2-inch pine planks that have been milled from 3/4 down to 1/2-inch stock so that they would actually take the bend from going flat to vertical at the bow. These were actually steam bent using the same technique I was using earlier, so just wanted to show you this real quick as an aside.
All right, so marked out the piece we're going to curve cut, and did some math and figured out, because I laid out the radius on that piece of just how much length of board that I need to actually be able to make it all the way around that 90-degree curve. It's about 15 3/4 inches, so just made sure I had enough run out on each end so that whenever the curve cut was finished, it would actually have enough piece to go all the way to the end of each one of those. Then got my piece out, got my edge mark out, and just going to lay out a depth of cut that I want to go to for each pass. So, and this will just, more than anything, it'll make sure that as we go through it, I'm not getting too deep or too shallow, and by the time I get done, I'll have enough cuts, enough depth of cut to actually bend around the corner. Now, how do I know how it's going to bend around the corner, you might ask? So what I did was took another one of our pieces that broke earlier, and then I made a thin rip off of the board, and then bent this around the curve. This would make sure that whatever the depth of cut, I would have material that would actually flow. So now that I've laid out my line, I finally got a new blade for the bandsaw, so we're going to get onto that to cut the depths, and then work on getting this bent around that corner.
I find curve cutting to be somewhat meditative because it's the exact same motion over and over and over again, and once you finally get through all the cuts, it's a little bit magical watching the piece that was once incredibly rigid bend around the curve just like you wanted to, and I've always found it to be a fun process. So here we go, having it clamped in place after glue's been laid underneath it, and I'm just going through right now and pasting extra glue in between the grooves just to reinforce it a little bit and make sure that that edge is nice and stiff and there's not any chip out. We ended up wrapping carpet around this edge and stapling in place so that there'd be just a soft edge for the cats to grab onto when they jumped up. Ended up working out really nice that way.
All right, so that curve cut is all set up and in drying right now, almost finished with that. So the next part is start on is the bench portion of this and the end on here. So behind me, I've got a couple more boards brought in and the remnant of some others that we're gonna rip cut the length of. We want about a 12-inch wide bench, something that's nice and comfortable to sit on, but not too wide that it sticks out so far in the room. So we're gonna rip those lengthwise and then join them side to side, and then we can get to work on that end piece on it that's the last leg of it. So after that, we'll probably go ahead and start getting holes cut and start getting this thing assembled. But for right now, let's go ahead and get a bench seat made.
So this rip cut went a little smoother than I thought it would. I switched to a worm drive saw that I own, and it seemed to do the job pretty good. The material's pretty thick, and doing rip cuts is always a little bit more difficult than doing a cross cut. The blades aren't really designed around that whenever you go into the cuts on it. So that's getting it all finished up and straight. Now I'm running it through the table saw to just make sure the sides are nice and parallel. So trying to get the most out of these cutoffs is hard when I'm just trying to eliminate the green growth, the bark off the outside. So getting both sides parallel is pretty important for doing a glue up like this, and it went pretty smooth.
So we got our boards cut for the seat right here, and we will get those sent through the planer here in a minute. But first, we need to get the boards cut for the upright, for the arm at the end that you're going to lean against whenever you're sitting in it. So we need this to be about the same size, but only 3 feet tall for a chair back. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut those next, and then that way we'll be pretty much done with the table saw. We can put that away and get the planer out. So let's set you up, and I'm going to get those cut up, and we're going to do some planing.
So when you're planing, it's important to do them in sets so that the you're not moving the planer up and down all the time. In this case, I was doing one set for the bench and one set for the upright as I was moving along. So I ended up running the ones for the upright through a little bit more just to get rid of the low spots, because the mill cut is never very smooth.
So we got them through the planer, and they're all mostly flat, but flat enough. So the next thing we're going to do is put some glue in these, get them in the clamps, and have to let those sit overnight. But yeah, we're coming right along. So this ash, like I said, is salvage, so it's not quite perfect. And you know what? For this project, that's just fine. That's not going to hurt a darn thing. It'll none of the parts form like box joints or anything, so it's not that big a deal if stuff isn't perfectly square. Even though I do prefer things to be as nice as I can possibly make them. But you know, are you really doing a project if it doesn't challenge you a little bit and make you, you know, make you have to develop a little bit of skill, and sometimes that skill is just accepting that that's as good as it's going to get. So in carpentry, I know a lot of people, myself included, really get into the it's not perfect, I'm not going to build it, you know, sort of almost like a freeze where you don't know if you want to really do anything anymore because, well, you get that thought in your head of, obviously I just suck, so I'm not, why bother even trying? Well, I mean, that's not healthy. You know, that's never a good thought to have in your head, and also, don't talk about my friend like that, even if you're talking about yourself. So, but two, you've got to dare to be bad at things. So, whenever I started into carpentry, this was actually out of necessity. I needed something to hold books. And I was too broke to buy a bookshelf that I really wanted. And I didn't just want to buy some, you know, cardboard piece of junk that you know, a lot of people got from like Walmart and stuff at the time, because in our area IKEA wasn't a thing yet. And it since has become that way, and I get it, not everybody, you know, has a garage or tools or anything to put this all together. And that's fine. Not everybody needs to be a carpenter or a woodworker or whatever word you want to use to describe, you know, the manipulating of tree bones, as I like to call it. But if it's something you want to do, you know, there's a million videos out there that tell you the exact same thing, is have the courage to do it badly. You know, be bad at something. Because you think about it, even learning to walk, you know, everybody fell a lot of times. And of course, you know, you've got the old tropes of, you know, got to learn to walk before you can run and all that stuff. And it does sound often, even to me, like just, you know, BS. Somebody trying to give you some sort of metaphor to make you feel better. But there's a grain of truth in it, of having to have the ability to say, I'm bad at this, but I'm bad at this at the moment. And you're probably gonna make something that you're not gonna like, you don't want to show anybody, and that's okay. So that first project, don't spend a lot of money and time on it because you know it's going to be bad. You've already got that thought in your head. What you can do is make something and learn from it. Well, where did I screw up? I didn't quite get that miter joint right. Well, maybe I need to spend a little time learning miter joints. Or, you know, there's a gap in there. I didn't like that gap there. What happened there? Or the simple one of like, I should have sanded it more. You know, and that's the easiest one of all, because like, well, sand it again. You know, get your parts out and go to it, because you can always correct a mistake. And that's the one that we tend to get in that mindset where it's one of those like, I didn't do it right, so therefore I can, I got to start all over. Well, do you? Can you sand down that piece of material and try again? Because usually the answer to that is yes, but kind of depends on how you learn too. Do you learn from books? Do you learn from watching? Do you learn from doing? I'm one of those. I learned from doing, and when I built that first cabinet, my father wasn't a great woodworker. He'll admit that himself today, but he let me use the tools to try. And again, it's not like we had a shop full of tools that were specifically meant for woodworking. My dad was a gearhead, but he had enough stuff that we could get by. And to be honest with you, I still have that bookshelf today. It sits in my front living room, and I took it apart and I changed it after the fact because I didn't like how it looked, and I wasn't okay with just saying, well, that's as good as it's going to get, when I didn't have anything else going on at the time. So I stripped it down and sanded it, replaced a few parts, cleaned it up, and I still have it today. So I guess what I'm saying is that I'm doing a bit of a silly project here, making a cat tree out of some really, what a lot would consider to be fancy wood. But this is also me practicing on the tools of do a better miter joint, learn how to put stuff together, steam bending, all those things. And you do it enough times, you'll see the progress. It shows up. You can't miss it. And you put two of your objects next to each other, first one you made and the last one you made, and it's pretty evident of which one's the best. And you can see the progress that you made. So I guess what I'm saying is, by building a silly cat tree, have the courage to be bad at something. So we're gonna get these glued up and start assembling things pretty soon.
Okay, I forgot. Not quite there yet. Still have to make these two uprights to separate these two platforms. So we're going to do that real quick.
This turning was a bit more fun to play with because I didn't have to worry about wrapping a rope around it and how that geometry was going to work. I was able to play a little bit more and make more of a classic style spindle on it. So I actually enjoyed doing this a little bit more than I did the first set because there's a little less to it. Though I still have to take measurements along the way, so with the tenons at each end, and then be able to replicate it when I make the second one.
All right, got these turned out just the way we wanted them. Yeah, for the most part, anyway. But mostly a matching set. Got some tear out on there, but you know what? It's a cat tree. It's fine. So it'll clean up just as well with a little bit of sanding, and the cats certainly won't mind. So now that we've got this done, probably going to move over to what I was doing before we forgot these, and work on the end of the bench, and probably make some gussets to go with it to help stiffen up the bench. So let's go do that next.
All right, got all the lines laid out for the end of the bench. Gonna start cutting it pretty soon so this pocket can actually support the bench that's over there. So give you guys a view of that here in a bit. So I spent the day laying out the drawings for this cut while I had some friends over, and we were
playing around doing woodworking in the garage. So my wife had the brilliant idea that I kind of liked as well of making this look a bit like the end of a church pew. Though neither one of us are particularly religious, but it seemed like a fun idea to have the end of the bench look like a church pew, and also it seemed to just fit in really well with it. So the combination of tools here was just to try and get all these little details as much as I could do with the saw and not have to fight nearly as much. So here I'm cutting the end of the bench over and getting it rounded into shape that so that none of the cats have a square corner sticking out. So there I am using the scrub plane and marking out lines to cut the tenon on this.
Whew. Okay, so that is the majority of the seat. Still needs to do a lot of finishing on it, but we'll get to that. Need to work on getting these put together. So you probably can see from here, I've already cut a tenon out on the end of this. So what we're going to do to hold this seat into the end of the bench is we're going to cut a mortise right here. So this will be held together with a mortise and tenon joint, and probably come from the opposite side with some sort of decorative fastener and to really hold them together. Also, not liking the grain direction on the end of this, and also this is pretty narrow. So what we'll probably do is take some of the cutoff that I've got. We're gonna make a little plate to go on here so that whenever you're leaning on this, don't have to worry about this knob out on the end getting snapped off from just somebody pushing on it. So that'll get all cleaned up with files, and we'll pretty that up here pretty soon. So, but need to get the router down and cut this this mortise in.
So ended up using a spiral up bit to complete this, and it worked pretty well. Using a chisel here to clear out most of the material. We ended up deciding after the fact to just make this a through tenon so that it could actually show and be a little bit decorative, and I think it actually came out pretty well. So my wife bought me this nice router plane, which really helped in squaring up the bottom. So sad we didn't end up using it, but still liked it all the same.
Alright, so there we go. We've got a standing mortise and tenon. This will make up the bench. Still need to do some fitting, make sure everything's going to line up right, and got to router the edges and clean everything up. But that makes up our bench. So next set of parts is need to drill holes in platforms so that all the legs will line up, and start doing a dry fit, getting parts put together. So I think next thing I'm going to do is start working on the platforms and get the holes drilled and located on those based on our drawing. And then, yeah, let's just keep chugging along.
So as you can tell, this is kind of a complicated drawing, but that bottom platform is this big 18 by 18 square on the bottom. So that number up here, these two are in a line, and then this one's kind of offset. So what we're going to do is come in 6 inches and draw a line, and then the other dimension is they are set 3 inches in on each side. So we're going to locate those two first. So after that comes the third one, which is this number here, located 3 inches in from the edge and 6 inches in from the back edge. So let's get to it. All right. There we go. So 3 inches in from there on both sides. We've got that set. Let's go 6 inches. All right, and that makes a corner. There we go. All right, So, as we're looking at it, we need to locate that hole,
Which, like we said, is
3 inches in and 6 inches down. So, 3 inches in, 6 inches down. That'll be our next hole. So this lip around here is actually for the carpet, for the padding for the cats to sit into. So go through and we'll get a drill on those. So you might be asking yourself right about now how we're going to get that bench in the middle of that leg, that third leg sitting there on the back side. And, that's a good question because, I had to think through this as well. But usually the most obvious answer is more often than not the correct one. So what we're going to do is back over here on the lathe is we are going to cut a shoulder into this and then separate this into 2 pieces so that there is a mortise and tenon joint for the bench to sit down on top of. And then we'll fasten the other one back onto it with a double-ended bolt. So have the other 2 legs already standing up on there with the lag screws going through the bottom. And nothing to it but to do it. I'm actually really fond of doing sort of operations like this that require a certain amount of precision to it. It's always good practice to be able to make something fit really nicely simply with hand tools and basic measurements. It's I enjoy the challenge of it, and it's satisfying at the very end whenever it all comes out and fits exactly the way you intended to. So good time if you ever get a chance to try it yourself.
okay. Let's see how we did. It's not the right spot. Okay. Hold that thought.
Okay, so proof positive that sometimes CAD can bite you in the ass. So had to go back and look at the math, and I had taken a measurement from this corner over to here, and my drawing says it should be 7 inches, but obviously that doesn't line up. So working the math backwards, figured out that between these 2 is supposed to be 9 inches. So, hey, what are you gonna do? Stuff happens. Luckily, I think this circle here not going to be a big deal. I can probably glue the circle back in there with a little bit of effort, and it'll be okay in the end. I can always replace it down the road. But we'll go ahead and cut that, and let's try this again. Round 2. All right, up we go. Onto there, and looky there, it actually fits. So, got these sticking through. That's not that big a deal. So the intent to hold this platform is there's a significant difference in diameter. The bottom of this is about 3 inches. That dowel in the middles is a 2 inch. So we got plenty of room to actually drop 3 screws around the outside of this, hold this whole platform down. And we'll be off and going. So I'll end up using a flush cut saw to cut those off nice and flat so that we can attach the fastener inside. So do a little repair on this, and then we'll fit up the next platform on the top. Definitely gonna double check my measurements this time around. And yeah, let's just keep chugging along and get the next 2 new parts put together.
got our platform fitted up here, and the next step is going to be to put the next leg that goes up on top of these and sits in here. So I think what we're going to do next is we're going to pull this off like so. And we're going to use our center finding jig to actually mark the centers of these, and then insert our hardware that goes in the bottom of these and in the top of that to actually make these all two together. And I'll show you this center finding jig here real quick.
So if you do any turning at all, these are like super helpful for finding the center of things on round objects. Their biggest advantage is the fact that they just cut a simple 45 across the surface. So like the end of this right here, which let me just turn you a little bit. So you got the end of that we've cut off, and then you have the shoulders on these. So what you do is you set it across here, and make sure you can see that. Then you're gonna reach in and make a line, then rotate your piece, make another line. So, and that will find you the center of your part pretty close, as long as it's in, this was turned about center. So unfortunately, as you can tell, my lathe has quite a bit of play in it, which I need to rectify, and that is not quite in the middle. But for the purposes of what we're doing, that'll be okay.
So also a note while I'm marking these out that I just thought of. You can buy these, and I'm sure there's somebody that sells them probably for like $20 or less money. But I had access to a 3D printer, so I modeled this one up and just 3D printed it. But for that matter, you can take a piece of plywood, do a plunge cut, and saw a hole in it, saw a gap in it like this, and then just put some dowel stock around the outside that's square to it, and that'll get you the exact same results. So if you can make a tool in this economy, why bother spending the money on it? Alright, so next thing, need to cut this tenon off and get the mating bolt put in between the two. So go ahead and use our joiner saw to do that. So a very sharp saw. So trying to get a nice even cut all the way around. At least as best I can anyway. There we go. Didn't want any tear out on that tenon. So we're going to use our center finder jig again on both of these and get that bolt put in. Well, that became something pretty quick, didn't it? So got all the pieces dry fit together. So our Morrison tenon here is nice and heavy and certainly doesn't have any rock to it. So this is going to be sitting up against a wall. Not going to be too worried about it, but that arm stir seems nice. So I don't like the grain direction on this, and I'm worried this knob might snap off, so we'll probably put a board right across here. So just a little pad, something even to make it a little bit wider to lean your arm on. And once all the screws are in, this thing stiffens up pretty well. So we're going to probably move on to one of my least favorite parts of woodworking is finishing. So still need to router the edge on the bench and clean this up, but then we're into sanding and cutting carpet to fit into these platforms and wrap this edge and start looking at getting a some sort of finish put on this. But you know, for not actually that much investment beyond my time, it's come along pretty well. So still have to do that chore finishing though, so let's just get to it and get it over with. Okay, so working on getting the bench finished up. I need to router this edge to give it a little decorative and round it off, make it a little nicer to touch. So I'm going to attempt something here that I've only done a couple times, but I've made a template that's nice and finished. It's got a good radius top on it and straight sides, and I'm going to hot glue this down. And the reason why is I need the bit that I have is almost the same thickness as the bench. It's just a touch shy. But I need a surface for the bearing on the router bit to ride on. So that's what this will provide, a little extra thickness. And in order to put it on, we're gonna use hot glue and hot glue that in place. Probably put some extra clamps just to make sure that it doesn't slip, but that'll do the most of the work. So we're gonna get that hot glue heated up and glue this on, and then bring you back for the router and finishing.
So I got this router bit a while back, and I really like it. It's a decorative bullnose and is kind of pretty, so I thought it would look really nice on this. Right about here in the cut, I had a problem that the board wasn't perfectly parallel from one end to the other, probably because my my planer is not in the best of shape. I've kind of abused it over the years, and also out here at the end of the bullnose, I pulled the template back from the end a little bit to be able to rely on it. Problem was there's a bit of gap in between the bearing on that bit and the actual cutting surface, and that's what happened. Is what I'm trying to plane off right there is that little bit of wood is sticking out and not allowing the bearing to ride on the surface that it exactly needs to. So I went through and scrubbed it off with a plane. So I decided to go down to the other end of the board right there and finish cleaning it up.
An adventure. See how we did. Alright. Well, I think that'll clean up real pretty. So, got a flash here that needs to come off with a hand plane. But that's a nice edge profile. I think I like that. So, not exactly the normal round over, and give some decoration. Yeah, pop the breaker in the middle of that because I forgot to turn off the heater. It's only 40 degrees outside, and I only have a 15 amp circuit on my garage. So that's where we're at. Need to finish this. Get the edge of that put down. Probably take a sander to it. Go ahead and get that done.
And then going to switch router bits. We're going to do the outside profile on this. We're going to make the armrest that goes on here. And then, yeah, start putting some stuff together. So get some finish put on here and get moving along. So let's get to working on shaving this down.
The bulk of what I'm doing here is just cleaning off the remainder of that flash, and also there was some unevenness in the glue up because I didn't use any biscuits, so trying to go through and smooth those out with a hand plane and a belt sander, and overall just make the bench look as pretty as I can. So not the best work I've ever done, but it was alright. So I imagine at some point I'll get annoyed by it and take it all apart and refinish it. So same treatment here on the end of the bench, as well as just trying to clean everything up and erase pencil lines and get it ready for the finish to go on it. So the belt sander was a big help here in smoothing out all those lines, and probably one of the best tools I ever bought for myself on a clearance rack a long time ago. It's not the most powerful, but definitely gets the job done, especially with a 120 grit. It'll leave a nice finish behind it. So here I am chasing the outer edge with a radius on the router, just so as not to leave any sharp corners behind. Really cleans it up nice and gives it a good finished look, in my opinion.
So we've reached that point. The finishes we're using today on these, we're going to get a little old school. We're going to do a base coat of shellac that will help hydrate the wood and fill in, just the pores of the wood. And then over the top of that, we are going to go with my favorite, a Helmsman Spar varnish. So then it'll make a nice glossy surface, look really pretty sitting inside the house. We'll set this one to the side for the moment. And let's get into getting this shellac on. This is kind of an older can that I've had, so let's see how's it look. Oh, that's just fine. That's perfect. And I am not a fancy carpenter, but a carpenter all the same. So I've already shaken this up ahead of time, and we're just going to work on getting this on here and seeing the colors fly. So I also like this part of the project where you finally get to see the bit of the fruits of what you've been doing. And this is actually, I think, the first project I've put this on this ash. So, and I gotta admit, I'm not disappointed by the colors that are coming off of this. This is really pretty, and I'm going kind of fast. I'm not really trying to lay this on thick because it doesn't necessarily need to be. So shellac is actually a kind of a wax, but kind of a finish. It's been used for a long time. And I think actually the base of it is like carnauba and, I don't know, magical unicorn bug's wings. I'm not sure. So all I know is that it finishes wood in a very effective way. I do know you don't need, you can't put it outside by itself. It has to have something over the top of it. Found that out the hard way, first time I ever used it, I didn't know a thing about it. Should have done a little bit more reading, but that's, my fault. And made just a table, nothing special, and stuck it outside, thinking that'll be good, be just like an oil finish, made weather. And come to find out, no, that in fact was not the case, because some rain and 24 hours later I come out and the entire piece has just this fog across it. And that was because this is not actually, it doesn't actually form a shell on the outside. It got water underneath this layer and just bubbled up. So lesson learned of, don't just do this by itself. It's got to have something else with it. Now, get to that time to flip this piece over so I do the other side. So let's get pick this piece up. Obviously throw something on the ground. That's alright, we're putting these down anyway.
There we go. And then go back through and let's put some more on. Kind of a meditating process, applying a finish. At least for me, anyway. The base of it, you know, is just getting it on there as smooth and even as you can, and not having to worry about every little microscopic corner of it. As much as most don't like to think about it, furniture is somewhat disposable. It does not last forever. So, do the job to your satisfaction and get on with your day. Well, alright, I'm going to switch over and do some other pieces, and let's stick you on a time lapse.
I've never once been the best claimed to be the best at finishing wood, and in fact, I'm probably one of the worst at it. I'm an absolute menace with the caulking gun, but luckily for this finish that I'm using, it's pretty forgiving in that, and you really just need to get it on there.
Alright, guys. So that's the end of this one. Still need to wrap the legs in the rope, but we'll get to that. So, as you can tell, the cats are already liking it, but this one's over, so I'll see you on the next one.